About 15 years ago, I was a high-powered travel industry executive in marketing, PR, happily married to a Brazilian executive chef and an active, healthy lifestyle. And then, like in most people's lives, life can change in an instant. I took out the trash in the last night's pizza box, and lo and behold, a 1,000-pound tree limb decides to clobber me, striking me down in the driveway by the dumpster and leaving me unconscious. I awoke 5 days later with a broken neck, C7 to be exact, and petrified because I didn't remember the last 5 days. I looked at my life underneath a microscope, discovering that marriage was not the right fit. He had been living a double life for almost a year. That the high power career was not necessarily the best fit. Everything I held dear crumbled, and I was at ground zero, and I had a choice to make whether to rebuild something that wasn't serving me or architect something new. And I decided to do that.
Welcome to the PersistenceU podcast with Lizbeth. Lizbeth Meredith is an author, speaker, and online teacher. Each week, she'll be delivering amazing stories from survivors and strivers, all threaded together with a dose of persistence. We're so glad you're listening.
Her sisters and brothers, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Heidi Siefkas. Heidi is a contributor to Unmapped, the solo women's travel anthology that I've been putting together. In meeting her, I realized that we have a lot in common. And she lives right in Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to meet soon in person, halfway in the middle. One of the many joys of writing is the people you meet that change your life one tiny bit at a time, one glimmer at a time. How have you been? I hope this week finds you well, as every other week. A little update, I'm teaching now all 3 classes before I go on my big trip in December for my own travel memoir. I am wrapping that process up. I have a big, huge class on Tuesdays that I teach virtually from another state, and then 2 classes in person here in Tennessee. It's been a joy. I have met the nicest people, the staff, the students. I have learned a lot. One is that I need a lot of help with punctuation. I've learned, like with everything else, practice makes progress. It felt like it was a job I could never do in the beginning. Over time, it's become more and more enjoyable. I hope you have been enjoying some of our recent episodes, and I will start releasing different author interviews from Unmapped. This solo women's anthology is fabulous because we have writers across the spectrum, some who've published a lot of books. Heidi's published 4, and we have writers who haven't necessarily been published before, just sharing from their heart different things they learned about themselves that enabled them to travel alone, or that traveling alone enabled them to understand about themselves. It's a really exciting project, and I'm not doing it alone. I have a great book cover artist and formatter, Bjorn, and then I have a fantastic final editor. I was going to bypass the cost of editing, which would have been a huge misstep, because we become blind to things that we see over and over again. It is a really good idea to not overlook hiring a real human to understand the meanings of things and where punctuation is missing. Should we rearrange the order? It's just been awesome. So thank you, Lloyd Russell, for that amazing service. Lloyd is now a professional proofreader, editor, having gone through a certification course. He's been on a couple of my prior books, helping before he did that, just because he loves books, he loves podcasting, he loves libraries, all the things. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Heidi. She is an author based in Nashville. She's a TEDx speaker and an adventurer, originally from small town Wisconsin. Heidi is the author of 4 inspirational nonfiction books, When All Balls Drop, With New Eyes, Cubicle to Cuba. I love that title. So thankful to have Heidi with us today to talk about her story and her participation in Unmapped. I hope that you will think about buying Unmapped for not just yourself, but for gifts for Christmas, because half the proceeds go to the YWCA. And I can think of nothing better than to feel good about your gift and buy early. We will have a pre-order time. I'll let you know about that as time goes on, but it should be in the next couple of weeks. We put the book on pre-order, and then the hard copies, and when I say hard, I do mean paperback, will be available for ordering. If you are going to buy a copy of Unmapped for Christmas for friends, I would suggest buying it early just in case the post office moves slowly. So anyhow, thanks for being here. I will introduce you to Heidi now. Thank you so much for being on PersistenceU and for being a fabulous contributor to Unmapped. I'm just thrilled to have you from Nashville. So excited that I get to meet you next week if all goes well.
Thank you so much. It's an awesome opportunity to share stories that inspire.
One of the things I loved when I looked at your bio originally was, and thank you, I think it was Barbara who connected us, Barbara
Yes.
Boss at Women Writers, Women's Books, who I just owe so much to and adore. But one of the things I noticed when I looked at your bio was like, wow, you have just in not very long ago done your own solo anthology regarding resilience and solo women travel. I was struck, like, that is so neat. And it's different probably than the one you're participating in. But I just wanted to hear a little bit about how that process went for you. I found curating an anthology to be a little trickier than I thought. I'm not always elegant with it. But when did you start it, and what kind of obstacles did you run into?
The book is Look Up: Global Stories of Resilience. I started it in 2022. Coincidentally, Barbara Boss also introduced me to one of the contributors to that book. So small world, gracias a ella. Thank you to her. I started the anthology because in sharing my backstory, people came out of the woodwork sharing their stories of overcoming obstacles and triumphing in spite of them. Not all people want to write their story, nor do they have the time or level of comfort to do that. But they were willing to contribute if they only had to sit down for an interview and I would pen their chapter. It was astounding how quickly I got 15 chapters from women, men, different ethnicities, different countries, all sharing, whether it would be immigration stories, escaping war stories, natural disaster stories, overcoming cancer. The common thread was look up, that you can, regardless of what language you speak, you find a silver lining, or you make lemonade out of lemons.
Right.
And you take whatever's happening, you grasp yourself in the moment and find the upside. Halfway through the project, life threw me a severe curveball, and my love of my life of 12 years was a medevac pilot in Maui, and one evening his plane crashed. He passed, and I had to stop the book. The biggest challenge was also the biggest lesson, and I needed to recreate life again, move off Maui, put myself in a new place to have this reboot. I chose Nashville, Tennessee. Somehow, this creative mecca of songwriters and creatives has made it possible for my healing, as well as continuing the book and finishing it this year. The final chapters are some of the most beautiful because I had just recently gone through something so raw that I was looking for others that could turn up the temperature of this book.
I misspoke when I said it was just solo women travel. It was solo travel. It was travel.
All of the stories are of overcoming some
love it.
struggle.
Yes.
And it's very similar to chicken soup for the soul,
Yes.
but without one particular ailment. So it's a global chicken soup for the soul that you'll find something in everybody's story that reminds you of the commonality that we are as humans. In these times of such tremendous polarity, I think it's perfectly timed.
Travel has worked for you in the past as a healer also. Can you talk a little bit about what you put in Unmapped? Because I love your story, but it harkens to a time a while back.
I think travel is one of the best teachers as well as healers. I tell people travel is better than any Ivy League education. One time in my life, I needed to test myself fully. And I believe going to another country solo and maybe doing something physically that's an adventure that may be a little bit difficult tests you physically, mentally, emotionally. About 15 years ago, I was a high-powered travel industry executive in marketing, PR, happily married to a Brazilian executive chef and an active, healthy lifestyle. And then, like in most people's lives, life can change in an instant. I took out the trash in the last night's pizza box, and lo and behold, 1,000-pound tree limb decides to clobber me, striking me down in the driveway by the dumpster and leaving me unconscious. I awoke 5 days later with a broken neck, C7 to be exact, and petrified because I didn't remember the last 5 days. Luckily, I had a very skilled neurosurgeon and went under neurosurgery and then was in an immobilization brace for my neck and torso and back for 6 months, during which time I looked at my life underneath a microscope, discovering that marriage was not the right fit. He had been living a double life for almost a year. That the high power career was not necessarily the best fit. In essence, everything I held dear crumbled, and I was at ground zero. I had a choice to make, whether to rebuild something that wasn't serving me or architect something new. And so I decided to do that. But first was healing physically, emotionally, and mentally. And when my family and doctors said, yeah, we're going to give you a clean bill of health, I said, I'm going to be the judge of that. And I decided to go on a solo walkabout to the farthest place from Florida at the time, which was the Strait of Magellan at the tip of Chile, and going to Torres del Paine National Park in Chile to see my first glacier, hike
Wow.
W Trail, see guanacos, they're like llamas, and just discover for myself if I had the wherewithal to embrace life fully again.
And did you have the wherewithal to embrace life fully again?
Yes, it was on the hiking trail that I found that I was healed. There is a point in Torres del Paine which has 3 spires. They're granite pointed spires, and there was the pinnacle of my, yep, I'm on this life 2.0, and I'm going to switch my career, find love again, and I'm going to write my story. All 3 of those have happened.
That's so exciting. And you learned early in your life that you could endure a lot and still keep moving forward. And how did that factor into then the second huge life changing, probably might not have been the second, but losing your partner a few years ago?
Without having a tremendous loss that was multifaceted, and learning that I have a power when everything else is going wrong to be in the moment. And that's really all we do have. We're not guaranteed the next moment. And then the ability to change your internal channel to somehow resurrect what this moment is. And I put the wrapping paper on that lesson and called it a mantra. And that's the whole look up mantra that is the common thread in my latest book. Without having that mantra look up, I don't think that I would have been able to pick myself up and start afresh in a new normal without the person that I assumed was going to be with me on this journey. There's some loss that you anticipate, whether it's pets, parents, careers, but you don't anticipate in your mid 40s to lose your common aged life partner. His name was Brian. He was the epitome of living in the moment. He instilled in me to take time to play, because even if you're an adult, there's still some beauty, some fun in everything.
I love that. If we're not careful in life, we could go crisis to crisis, especially as we get older. We can go funeral to funeral and not take the time to build fun inside it. I'm a workaholic and I can do that at times. Making sure that we are in the moment and create moments of joy is a huge part of resilience. Not simply, hey, I went through something tough and I survived it, but here's what I came out with. This is what I learned. This is what I celebrate. So that's really exciting. I'm so glad you were able to finish that beautiful book then, the anthology. And today you're living in Nashville and we will meet up soon. I'm really looking forward to this. That's so exciting. Nashville's got to be a huge change from Hawaii.
It is, but what I've found in Tennessee, I think they have more waterfalls than Hawaii. They look like they're always in tropical places, but none of them are really warm. All of them are rather crisp. I have made it my journey to find almost all of them in Tennessee and to revisit them, because I think it's a beautiful way to remind you of the power of Mother Nature. The sound is just so recalibrating yourself with this planet we live on.
Exactly. You and I both lived in places, you in Hawaii, me in Alaska, where we could have the mindset like, this is the most beautiful place in the world. There will be nothing like it ever. And it is surprising, although it's true. Hawaii is beautiful. Alaska is beautiful. There are stunning sights wherever a person finds themselves if we continue to look for them.
Correct.
And I think that's huge. Nashville is very big and crowded and lovely, so much to do, I'm sure, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful here, and I'm glad that you've made this your home for at least for now. So what are you working on next, and where can people connect with you to learn more about your story outside of finding you inside Unmapped?
It's very interesting that you asked me this. I just released my 4th book, and as soon as I released it, somebody contacted me saying, I would be an excellent story for your book. I just published it. So I have a feeling there is going to be a 2nd edition of Look Up Global Stories of Resilience, but I'm not quite sure what format it is going to take on, because it's already in audio, in digital, and print. I may consider doing a podcast version of it. I haven't decided yet, but with just everyone being time-starved and listening to podcasts or audiobooks on the elliptical or on their commute to work, et cetera, I think that's one thing. But I'm going to definitely do a 2nd edition in some way, shape, or form. During the pandemic, I wrote a screenplay of my first 2 books. And at that time, everyone was writing screenplays. So it wasn't necessarily a good time to submit those for producer reviews. However, now I think is a better time. And so I'm going to be taking a stab of getting on the small or big screen with at least the tree story and then the Patagonia story.
Oh, I think that is so exciting. I'm familiar with the Patagonia story. It's visually amazing and a great story. There are a lot of people who get hit by trees, but not necessarily when you just traipse out to hand in the pizza box and a little bit of trash. And it's just that reminder, life really can change for any of us through no fault of our own in a nanosecond. And really the only thing we can control is what we do with that.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you're doing great things. Where can people learn more about you and find you and your books? HeidiSiefkas.com.
And I'm on most of all the social media channels. You can find my books on my website. It'll lead you to Amazon. And if you like audiobooks, that's one way you can continue with your busy life, but also get these nuggets of wisdom.
I love that. It's great on your way to work or if you're doing chores to just have a listen. So good for you for doing that. Did you narrate it?
I did narrate all of my books.
Okay.
And I first went into a studio in Hawaii for the first one. And then I had a little life interruption. My father was having heart surgery, and I went back to the mainland to help him with that. The next two were narrated from his closet.
Perfect.
So I made my own studio, and this time on the fourth one, I used a combination of studio as well as some AI to help me with multiple people's voices.
I love it. Did you use 11 Labs or what did you do?
I used 11 Labs. Yeah.
I've never done it. I always think that might be too smart for me, but it seems like something I want to get to know.
It definitely gets you to a product that then you have to go through and finesse. And I always, whether in a studio or at home, have a professional audio editor go through it so that there's enough gap between chapters and that the levels are appropriate, because you don't want to put out something that's poorly recorded and the audio is subpar.
Wonderful. Good for you. That's good to know. And other writers who listen will be interested in that as well. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to meet you in person. I've loved meeting you today.
Likewise.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Thank you so much for listening. Now, to find out more, head on over to lameredith.com and be sure to hop on the mailing list too. If you've enjoyed this show, please leave a rating and review or share with a friend. And if you really liked it, go ahead and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Persistence U with Lizbeth.